in the sky. It's a bird.
It's a plane.
It's your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
And just like that, the original Watching Comics hosts are back in full force. Jake, hello.
Hey, Mitch.
How's it going?
It's good. You know, I missed us.
Oh, shucks. I missed us too.
And I like Nick, and Nick is great, but it's like, you know, to stick with the theme, it sure is great having She-Hulk in the Fantastic Four, but there's nothing like bringing Johnny Storm back from the dead.
Man, I'm so glad that I could be Johnny Storm in this analogy. It's like that's bucket list material right there. Hey, Mom, I've arrived. look at me. But the cool thing about Nick is, I mean, he did a good job. His appearance was legit. Y'all conquered the Fantastic Four movie mess with style and panache, but it's just like we're wearing thin out of our personal connection network of kind of bald bearded dudes. So it's like Nick was a good placeholder there, but it's like, how many more options are there?
Well, you know, more people are entering their 30s every day. So yeah.
Valid point.
Not everyone was as fortunate as I. So
for those of you that are listening to the Watching Comics podcast but don't know who Jake or I are, Jake is bald, I'm bald, and we both have beards. And Nick, who was on last week, is bald and has a beard as well. So connect the dots.
Yeah, but I want to be really clear that my genetics made this necessary long before everyone else.
That's true. You've been going the shaved route for almost the entire duration of our friendship, which is quite a while. So well, that's commitment.
My freshman year of college, it probably should have been shaved.
Clinging to scraps.
Well, gosh, this is such a look into like who I was and a little bit who I still am. But like the reaction of other people to me not shaving it was so funny to me that at that 18, 19-year-old punk stage, I was like, I'm going to see how long I can ride this out and just how upset other people will be about my haircut.
Hashtag not quite existential Jake.
Yeah, no.
So anyways, if you are a first-time listener, welcome to the Watching Comics podcast. My name is Mitch. My co-host is Jake. We are here to talk to you about the intersection of comic books coming to your television and movie screens.
That's it. That's us. That's what we do.
Boom, shakalaka, if anyone still says that. Know that you're not alone, because I just dropped that right there on the internet for everybody to hear. So we are jumping into the middle segment of Luke Cage. I know this is just kind of a little bit weird. I had some crazy stuff go down. Jake and I are both close to finishing up different grad school programs, and I had my comps a couple weeks ago, which is why Nick made a nice appearance on that stuff and everything like that. And, you know, of course, Jake and I both are also married to wives and have kids and stuff, and just life happens, yo. But here we are back, ready to dish on the middle segment, episodes 4 through 8 of Luke Cage season 2.
That's it. And man, it feels like we took that Fantastic Four break in the middle, and I've been in that headspace, so it was a little bit of whiplash getting back in, but we got there, and it's been fun.
I've been, as the kids do these days, I've been following you on the Twitters and noticed that you have been very heavy on your Fantastic Four shout outs. So yeah, you've been diving into the well.
Yeah, I went back. I went back into the run that Nick and I talked about a lot. I have a Marvel Unlimited subscription, which DC needs something like that because it's just fantastic. Because it's half of everything I need. I just need DC to jump in, but it's an app that just lets me read nearly anything from Marvel's back catalog. And so,
can I just say, I love how prestigious you were in your nerdery right there when you were just like casually like, yeah, I have a Marvel Unlimited subscription and BD. And then it's just like, but man, can DC just get off of their thumbs and just like get after it already? Man, like, come on, man. It's like classic country club Jake there, but still inherently nervous. Like, it's just, I think that's just a great slice of exactly what we're aiming for with this project here.
Yeah, I think definitely. And you know, to be clear, if we didn't have this Luke Cage thing to talk about, I could give you a whole episode on the DC Unlimited. But
oh my gosh, I think we'll talk about this during our next production meeting, aka text stream. But I think there's some DC related trailers and news and stuff that we definitely need to dish on soon. But we've got to get through Luke Cage first. But I do want to say publicly, Nick, I forgot to message this to you when we were messaging back and forth about your appearance. Thank you so much for mentioning Bryce Dallas Howard on this podcast. When I was listening to it on my commute to work, I fist pumped. I was so happy. I am completely and unabashedly on the BDH bandwagon and just refuse to believe that the Jurassic World movies exist, but the rest of her canon, I am there for it. She is ridiculously talented. Nick, bravo, well done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nick brought all kinds of quality.
He sure did. I think we'll keep him around. That won't be the last time the adoring public hear Nick.
Definitely.
So Luke Cage, middle episodes here. Jake, give me one sentence summation of these middle 4 episodes.
One sentence.
That sigh actually might have been all of it.
Because there's I don't want to be overly critical. I'm going to say good, not great.
Okay. I'm going to say convoluted.
Yep. Okay.
I'm going to say convoluted. Here are a couple of things, and I just want to see what you think. All right. I'm just going to lay the table with a couple of takes here. I'm just going to dip my toe in, and I want you to either light me on fire or run with it. Okay.
Deal.
So take number 1 is it possible that the writers or showrunners of Luke Cage are having trouble coming to terms with the fact that the most interesting characters they've written in the show are not Luke Cage, and everything they're trying to do with the principal character is not interesting?
I think you might be onto something there, because it explains one of my biggest complaints with this season, which is the inconsistent characterization of Luke Cage.
Yes. Okay. It's almost like I will let you finish that after I just say this one thing. Like, it just seems like he is, and maybe this is intentional. It'll all come to a head at the very end, but it seems like he doesn't have an identity. He just completely shapeshifts depending on the relationship he has with the person that he is directly interacting with. It's like he's completely engaging and three-dimensional, and I want more of it when he's on screen with Claire, and the interactions with him and Bushmaster, when Bushmaster just rocks his crap, I kind of love it. And then when he's by himself, or when he's trying to lead a cause or like go into investigator Luke Cage mode, I'm just like, dude, like, really?
Yeah, it's funny that my favorite version of Luke Cage is from the very lackluster Defenders show. And I really liked that they
hot take there, Jake, coming in hot.
Well, and Defenders isn't bad, and I've said elsewhere that I think the biggest problem was the villain, but
and Iron Fist.
Well, and that's the thing, is that like Luke almost began the process of redeeming that character by putting him in that big brother Luke role, where he was very noble. He wasn't exactly preachy about it, although he wasn't afraid to let the others hear what he thought. And he was a really likable guy. I really liked that Luke Cage. And I don't dislike this Luke Cage. I just don't know who this Luke Cage is. Because like you're saying, he's just kind of chameleoning himself to whatever's going on around him. And it really is like they're trying to fill all these different roles with the character. And I suppose that could work if the season were doing a little more to talk about, does Luke know who he is? Maybe if that was the theme, was Luke trying to figure himself out. And sometimes I see flashes of that and I think, okay, that's where we've been going with this. But I just don't see it working as the overall narrative of the season. And as a result, it ends up with Luke just feeling disjointed. It ends up with him feeling not well written at times and really inconsistent.
And maybe this is a greater representation of what we've been talking about. The other thing that I'm really confused by is Bushmaster and Mariah, that rivalry is based on bad blood between families. Again, another familial thing that we've got in season 2 here. Couldn't branch out from that, but that's fine. I could maybe jive with that. The biggest issue I have is I don't think, at least yet, have established the core of Luke Cage's heroism to a point to make it seem believable for him to swoop in and try to intervene in this feud that's going on between two characters that might as well exist outside of the Luke Cage universe. Like, it's kind of like Luke Cage isn't Boy Scout enough for me to be like, well, of course he's going to get in the middle of that feud, because he doesn't do that, but he doesn't know himself well enough to really fall back on this quote unquote heroic code. So I find myself going, like, when I realize, spoiler alert, when Bushmaster finally captures Mariah and tells Mariah why he's doing what he's doing, the only question I can think of is like, so why does this affect Luke, other than the fact that this is all in Harlem? Because Luke hasn't been like that heroic guy enough yet for me to be like, well, of course he's going to intervene because he's the Boy Scout. Does any of that make sense?
Yeah, that really does. And I appreciate that you bring that up, because it's so hard for me to express this, because I don't want to give the impression that there's nothing good happening in this show, that I hate every second of it, because I really have enjoyed some parts of it. But I do think that there are some themes and some ideas that look really good on paper, that the show has gotten caught up on those themes and ideas rather than getting caught up on telling a good story first. And it's like this idea of Harlem as the big, important, key thing, this idea of, Luke and what he represents or could represent, and the hero's journey that he's been on, and Bushmaster versus Mariah, and this family connection, and all of these different things that go into it. There are these moments where it flirts with brilliance, but because it has failed to establish itself first and foremost as an engaging story, that makes those points and those moments of brilliance just moments instead of part of an overarching thing. It's a storytelling genre above all. And we've discussed here the awesomeness that is Black Panther, that is Jessica Jones. We've talked about Watchmen, and there are certainly moments where these kind of stories can transcend their genre, and where they can become something bigger than they are, and they can become this cultural moment. But I feel like maybe Luke Cage, again, I'm assuming a lot, and I feel a bit unfair about that, but I just get this vibe like Luke Cage is trying to be some of those things, but forgetting that first and foremost, its art form is a story.
Yeah, I think you could be onto something there. It's like maybe it's, dare I say, more of a question of what is the greater story we're trying to tell? Is it a narrative of Luke Cage where we uncover his character as we go along and as he interacts with these other things that are going on around him, a la Jessica Jones, which I feel like Jessica Jones is essentially a character study of her with a lot of stuff going on around her? Or is Luke Cage more of a question of, we want to take a narrative arc that is normally done in droves and droves and droves of TV and campy action movies with white people, and just make it familiar with African Americans, and trust that the meta world will take care of itself, which, again, I don't think there's one decision better than the other. Because one thing that I particularly want to commend is I love what they're doing with Bushmaster, with this concept of like, okay, I feel like we've seen characters like Bushmaster in so many different forms with only white folks, right? Like with these drug lords, or these gang leaders, or these influential hot-headed men that come in and say like, I'm just going to rule this one spot or this one area, or I'm going to be the lord of this area right now. And we just go along with it because it's like, oh, it's another mean bad white guy going up against a good bad white guy, and that sort of thing, right? And they're doing that here with Harlem, with the Jamaican culture, the African American culture, the hip hop culture, all of this. And I think they're doing it wonderfully. The Bushmaster infusion and the way he's butting heads with Mariah, I think is probably the strongest point of this season. And I love that they're giving that the representation, because Lord knows we're overdue for it. But I'm also recognizing then that also means that portions of this are going to go over my head because it's not necessarily meant for me because I'm a privileged white guy. So I want to recognize that and love that that is there, and love that we're finally catching up with that Netflix continues to be a standard setter for these sorts of things. But I still can't ignore that at its core, it seems like Luke Cage as a character, the way they're writing him, is still feeling around in the dark in a not completely gripping way.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I don't know. I feel like the character deserves a little better, like maybe just sit down and figure out what is his role in this? What's his motivation in it? And I don't know. Do you get the sense that maybe they're trying, I don't know, maybe I'm giving them more credit than they're due, but do you feel like maybe they're trying to release him a little bit from the morality end of it so that he can become a hero for hire? Because I see them going that direction with, what was his name? Piranha.
Yes.
And I see them going that direction with Luke moving towards the hero for hire. But the problem is that the first season established him so strongly. And Luke Cage, the hero for hire, is a hero and he is a good guy. But they worked so hard to establish this moral code, this symbol of something for Luke, that it makes it probably a little harder to move him in the direction of heroes for hire.
Mm-hmm. I would love to see that. I would love to see that dichotomy fleshed out a little bit more. Like, what if it was a little bit more of a struggle of like, I want to go the hero for hire route, but at the same time, I feel an obligation to just represent the everyman at the same time. Like, I feel like that could be an inner struggle, and there's room for that to be on screen a little bit more. But I don't know. What I do find very interesting is I haven't read ahead or watched ahead to see any spoilers or anything, but you can go on Vulture or AV Club or IMDb or a number of other sites, and you can see the ratings or grades of each individual episode for these websites that break them down, right? And it's the same thing. The lowest scores and the lowest grades are right here in this middle ground, B's and C's. And then all of a sudden you get to like the last 2 or 3 episodes and everything's getting like an 8.1 or an A+ or an A- type of rating. So clearly a good chunk of the internet, people reviewing and writing and ingesting this stuff, think that the way it ramped up towards the end either makes sense or it got really real or had a like, holy crap, I didn't see that coming type of moment, which is helping me stay in the boat a little bit more eagerly than I probably would have normally felt. I really don't have much of a clue as to this natural breaking point that we made for this episode up at episode 8. I'm not really sure what that's going to look like, and maybe that's a good thing, but I'm just still so worried about a lack of interesting character development with the principal character that it may still be a little bit lackluster at the end. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a pessimistic white guy.
No, I think that this goes back to something that I've brought up before, is that I don't know that these Netflix shows need to go as long as they do sometimes. Because it's like, I don't know, maybe I don't fully understand, because who truly understands the Netflix television show model? But I think
it's a riddle wrapped inside an enigma.
Yeah, that like there have to be 6 people, the right 6 people have to get together and assemble their different sets of data to make sense of it. Another season of Stranger Things. Yes, cancel that. But I think that there's not a reason in my mind for these shows to go on so long that they start losing steam or that they wander a little in the middle, because it's not like you needed another week of ad revenue. And
we've talked about this with Jessica Jones.
Yeah.
And this is really interesting. Another podcast I listen to called The Watch. It's from The Ringer with these two guys, Ryan and Andy, and they do a wonderful job of just breaking down some great things from an industry professional perspective as far as music, TV, and movies are concerned. Sometimes I do a little bit of books, but they were talking about this recently, about the concept of like, why does Netflix prescribe too many episodes? Almost as though like you can just assume that that's what they're going to do, and it makes no sense.
Yeah.
I watched a couple of true crime docuseries that they released within the last year or so, watched them the last couple of months, and even those, which that's kind of like a Netflix bread and butter, where you're like, this is one of the reasons why you pay for a subscription in Netflix, is to get their new original true crime docuseries. And even then it's like, man, they were good, but they would have been even better if they were 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 episodes less. It just seems like this is a common thing we keep coming back to. I felt the same way about Mindhunter. I felt the same way about Jessica Jones. Like, it just seems like, as much as I love some of the things that they're putting out, and I do think that from top to bottom, Netflix is probably the most consistently excellent of the television networks right now. But it also feels like it's like with Netflix, you know, you're going to get some fat that could have been trimmed. And I don't know if I'm reaching a fatigue from that or a frustration from that, or if maybe I'm also spoiled by prestige TV and I just get impatient. And I'm like, man, the solution would have been easy. Just 11 episodes instead of 13.
Well, yeah. And that's just it. I mean, cause I don't know. When my standard is always like, I'm just a fan. I'm just a guy who's along for the ride, and I love it. And I'm grateful to be a part of it. But from my really uneducated layman's perspective, if I can identify places where this thing could have been edited, it frustrates me then to say, well, why couldn't the person getting paid to edit that? And I think that's where I always come back to on it, is like,
and I think you handle that with candor. Like, you're not being a jerk. I think you're just saying, like, if this is something I've noticed, then maybe some professionals could have noticed that too, or maybe did and then got silenced. I don't know.
Well, and that's, and you recognize, you saw the same thing on Twitter today. I noticed that I did, where someone was discussing the idea that fans think that they are co-owners in properties that they like, and what an insane idea that is. So to be clear, I don't think I'm owed anything here. I create what you want to create, guys. But I do think that if we're just all giving our opinions, which I suppose it's our podcast, so we might as well.
Yeah, damn right.
If we're just giving our opinions, I just think that it's like every Netflix show. Yeah, there's that extra room, and it just, Luke Cage has really fallen victim to this, because if we remember, after episode 3, I was getting psyched, and that moment with Claire had me really, really sold on where this thing could head. And now I feel like we spent the next 4 episodes just meandering about, trying to figure out what the themes are, what the points are, and which stories we're going to follow through.
Completely. Mariah.
Mm-hmm.
I can't, let me just preface this by saying Alfre Woodard is a great actress. She has had a pretty storied career. If you look at how long she's been doing this and some of the credits she's got on her IMDb, especially as she had to try to up and come back when it wasn't as prevalent for powerful Black women to get it as meaty roles. She has done the work. She has dug in and she has made it last. And I think she is doing a really good job with Mariah for the most part. But I'm wondering, Jake, my question for you is, it's not necessarily her performance, it's just the character itself. Have we gotten to a point where Mariah is kind of worn out, or are we still at an appropriate spot with her, or do we need more of her? What do you think about her? Because I almost feel like she's kind of floating in this purgatory of like, do we want more of her or not? What do we do with her?
Maybe the smartest thing Marvel did in hindsight, Netflix, Marvel, whomever is in charge of this, in hindsight, maybe the smartest thing they did was really minimize the Kingpin's role in season 2 of Daredevil. Because I am at a point right now where I would reach in my wallet and give whatever I can find in there to get one more episode with him in it. And I think that less is more sometimes. And I think that there's something to be said for where was Mariah going to go after last season? She really had this incredible character arc, and her development and her taking ownership of who she really wants to be was so compelling and fascinating, especially juxtaposed against Luke's much more humble story. And I thought it was really great. And I look at it now, and I'm just not as compelled by this, maybe trying to go legitimate, maybe trying to shore up her power, this whatever her goal is this season. I'm just, I'm not really as compelled by it. And I think that there maybe could have been a little more, but maybe that's part of the problem with bringing in someone like Bushmaster is when you split time between villains, as we've seen on some projects in the past, every Batman movie after Returns, when you start splitting that screen time up, you lose a little bit of each character. And maybe bringing in Bushmaster, while visually appealing and interesting in its own way, detracts a little bit from Mariah's ability to command as the primary antagonist.
It's an interesting point. And I just been having a hard time putting my thumb on it, because it's like I'm not anti-Mariah, but at the same time, it's like sometimes when they're doing her stuff on screen, I'm just like, yeah, this is cool. And then other times I'm like, and I can't decide with her. But I can tell you this. I love when Bushmaster is on screen. Yes. And maybe that is just so stereotypically fanboy of me, but he is. The dude is bringing the heat this season, which thank goodness, because we definitely need moments of heat to break up the monotony, and that's important. And so I don't want to negate that, because that's there for a reason. That's part of the recipe. I'm going to go out on a limb and say something has to happen with Mariah in this last portion of the season. She's either got to go legitimate, she's got to fall off the face of the earth and move away, she's got to die. Something has to happen. I can tell you right now, I'm not sure if I'm done with her, but I can tell you if they're going to drag her out in an uninteresting way in season 3, she's going to reach low-key status with me, which is like, why is he still in movies? It's like, there's only so much you can say of the whole thing. It was like, my brother's good, now he's bad. Okay, cool. You did that in 7 movies. Now what? Same thing with her. I feel like that's where we would be with her in season 3. But I guess I'm at this big question mark with her, because Luke saved her. And I'm kind of wondering, one, what was the motivation behind that? Because again, I don't think Luke has earned that Boy Scout status yet. And I don't say that that's a bad thing. I'm just saying, like, I don't think that decision is a believable one in the organic evolution of where we're at without seeing the end yet. So it's like he saved her. So does that mean something horrible happens to her in the next 3 episodes, or are we in for more of her, or does she go legit? Like, I don't know, but that just gives me a massive question mark for this character that felt like was kind of floating aimlessly for sure episodes like 6 and 7.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That, like, I don't know. I just
spoiler alert,
Mariah is such a fascinating character until she isn't. And yeah, I really feel like we're meandering with her too. And I think that's really maybe my summary at the start of this episode should have been meandering. Because I think I've used that word a few times now.
We're just kind of strolling through the park. Sometimes there's a punch, sometimes there's foliage.
I gotta say, I'm about at my limit with people in one scene discussing Luke Cage, so I'm clearly aware that they know who he is, and then about 30 seconds later drawing a gun and firing it at him. I am I'm about over this crap. Like, I understand.
Like, there are Sylvester Stallone movies that are better than that.
Punch him. I don't know. He doesn't have a reputation for being punch proof, and sure, it's not going to work, but at least you thought outside the box. Like, everybody.
At this point in the season, there's a viral video of Bushmaster going at him and owning him without the use of any weaponry.
Right.
Like, come on, man, use that. I would say that I feel like we sounded very similar to this, but a little bit more upbeat with the middle segment of Jessica Jones season 2
Yeah.
because we were kind of getting to that point where it's like, okay, her mother's clearly a thing. I don't know where it's going to go, but I hope they don't mess that up because they clearly put all those eggs in that basket, but she's not a formal villain. So it's like we've got to get all this character backstory in the middle segment of the season because the first few episodes were setting it up. Now we got to get this backstory to make it believable for us to get this payoff in the end. And I think it worked out. We called Jessica Jones Prestige TV, and we said season 2 still earns that title. So clearly it paid off. Judging by people's ratings and feedbacks without reading any spoilers of the latter portion of the season of Luke Cage 2 shows that something like this is coming. I've got faith in that formula. I really do. I don't want that to be lost in this episode. I have faith in it, and I'm going to write it out, and I'm pretty sure I'm probably going to be pleased at the end. I just don't know if even though with being pleased, if I'm still going to be asking like, but did we have to do that to get there?
Yeah, I think for me, if I were going to and I almost said this for my one sentence, but I didn't because I didn't want to give the wrong impression. So to get more sentences in, I do think we're on the right track. I do think this is still fascinating television. I think that it's better than a lot of things I've seen before. I do think, however, that these 4 episodes were the first time reviewing something for this podcast felt like a job to me. And it was the first time I felt like I had to get through something. And it's not that I wasn't enjoying it. It is that I don't know. It
wasn't your first choice for the evenings that you watched it.
Yeah. And it just wasn't the most compelling thing I'd seen in a while.
Mm-hmm. All right, so random spitball for you.
Yeah.
At this point in the season, which new character addition do you like better for the second season? Do you like Bushmaster or from this season or Punisher from Daredevil season 2?
Oh, well, so here's the thing that I don't think we've had a chance to discuss yet, but I hate the Punisher. So Bushmaster.
Well done.
Could I choose Misty Knight's bionic arm, perhaps? But I think
give me bionic anything, man. It's 2018. Right? Let's do it.
Oh man, bionic hair, I'm in. No, but I just think the Punisher. There's one story to tell with that guy, and if it ends with anything but his death, you didn't tell it right. And so I think like that story is just I don't know. It's like a gross misunderstanding of Charles Bronson's entire career, followed up by Marvel drawing everyone with muscles too big for their heads, and it's awful.
I think that's fair. That's completely honest. I'll be honest. I haven't seen the Punisher standalone season yet.
I haven't either.
Do that for this pod sometime. But yeah, I'm with you there. I love Daredevil. I think it's a toss up between Daredevil and Jessica Jones as far as who sits with the championship belt in this universe. But man, Bushmaster totally. I think so far, 8 episodes deep, Bushmaster is a phenomenal second season addition.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying him. I think that he has added well, and I wish now that I've talked about getting too caught up in the themes and everything, I wish sometimes that they would lean a little more into him and into this immigration story. Because I think there's something to be found there.
I love the culture that he brings.
Yeah, and this idea of this is a timeless crime story. This idea of we've come to this country and there was not anything for us we thought there would be, so now we're going to take it. And there's a certain tried and true element there, and yet the different sort of culture he's coming from provides an opportunity to put a new spin on it. And then also, if we really seen that in the superhero genre yet, this could have been something I think maybe a little more unique, maybe a little more, and maybe it will become that. But I think that Bushmaster is to me both exciting and a missed opportunity.
Yeah, he strikes. In some ways, he could strike some of the same chords that Killmonger did in Black Panther. This concept of I can learn something poetically profound through the lens of something that is dark and sinister and evil, if I'm allowed to understand why it became dark and sinister and evil first. And I think to me that's just one of the wonderful things about comic books is comic books just generally as an arc has been such a wonderful medium for social commentary. And that is a big reason why with villains like Doctor Doom and Lex Luthor and those kinds of people, like, there are moments throughout their character trajectory where you learn something from them, and it's not because they started being good. And I think that's Bushmaster is highly entertaining, brings a wonderful dose of extra culture to the show that is already a good, like, crowning achievement for moving more mainstream television towards diversity. But at the same time, like you said, like, I just feel like there's something captivating about that immigration story that I would love to see more of.
Yeah, and so I don't know. I guess I mean that as a criticism. I also mean it as a compliment. It's a hard thing to land on.
Yeah, and we're also floating in the middle of the season, so we'll see where we land.
And that's just it. Like, I'm always so I stress so much about the comments I'm going to make as I prepare for this mid-season episode, and I did the same with Jessica Jones, where I don't want to criticize something and then find out that I'm just an episode ahead. Like they're about to do exactly what I'm saying they should do. But I also don't want to compliment something and then find out that they're going a completely different direction with it. So I stress a little bit about these mid episodes. For
sure. I think that's fair. Totally entitled. I mean, heavy is the head that wears the crown, Jake.
Boy, don't we know it.
Oh, man. I mean, just call me LeBron James. I mean, I get it. I'm there.
Yeah, I hear you. Moving to LA.
Totally, man. Okay, so based off of the first 8 episodes, give Luke Cage season 2 a subject to change grade.
I think I came in ready to. I debated this. I think I'm going to go with B. I'll just say B average because I think that I feel like I've been harsher on it this episode than I meant to be. But I think that the more interesting talking points at this hump part we're at are the things that maybe could be stronger. But overall, I'm enjoying it still, and I do think that Bushmaster is compelling, and I do think that Mariah still has echoes of who she was, and so yeah, I'd give it a B.
I just love, I have to remind myself sometimes, I just love that, like, this is the reality that we have now where, like, we can watch high quality television that includes comic book inspired material. That's
right.
And so I remind myself of that, and I'm like, oh man, this is so great. It's so great that I get to just talk about Luke Cage being a little bit disappointing for a couple episodes. Like, that's awesome that that's my reality because I have something to watch. That said, I think B is a perfectly appropriate grade with where we're at now because it's recognizing the era that we're in and that this is still at its core high quality entertaining television, but there's still room to grow in these last 4 or 5 episodes.
Yeah.
I think it's safe in a non-judgmental way.
Yeah, and I think that's it is because I think I'm just trying to grade it. I'm trying to grade it both for what it is and what it could be. But you know, if the biggest problem is that, man, this is disappointing, it's a B, that's a pretty good place to be at. And
still better than Iron Fist.
Oh, gee, man. Yeah, it is.
Maybe we should talk this out right here, right now on the podcast for all of our beloved listeners and faithful followers. September is when the second season of Iron Fist that we didn't ask for comes back. So do we even, Jake? Do we even?
Here's the thing. They're going in a better direction with the villain. They're gonna give us Davos, the Steel Serpent, as he comes to be known.
That's just fun to say, Steel Serpent.
Isn't it? It alliterates so well.
It's just so comic booky.
The problem is that Davos should have been, like, not problem, but like he should have been season 1's villain, because what's truly thrilling about that is what it can set up in future episodes, because Davos eventually becomes the champion of another city other than Kunlun, and you get this very, very kung fu movie inspired storyline where you find out there's all these magic cities like Kunlun, and they have a tournament where all of their champions fight. and it's just so awesome and so kung fu-ish. And I fear we're just not going to get there because we're going to keep dragging our feet on all these things. And their take on Davos was kind of weird. And I just, Mitch, it could be so much more than it is. It could be so much more.
There it is. That is the fortune cookie summation of Iron Fist right there. Yeah. Netflix Iron Fist could be so much more than it is.
Giant sigh included.
Asterisk, sigh, asterisk. It's very, very important to understand the inflection. I don't want the text to mistreat how passionate I feel about this. So, Iron Fist, heavy sigh. We're actually contractually obligated to include a heavy sigh every time we mention Iron Fist.
I think that's somewhere in, that's the terms of service for something we use.
For sure. It's got to be. If not, we'll write that in. We run this thing. All right, so thank you so much for jumping in on this with us, folks. Watching Comics Podcast, hit us up at watchingcomics.com. Guess what? We have 2 very special announcements coming next month. We are super excited to share them with you. Stuff is getting fun. It's going to be so cool. Legitimately cool. Anyway, check us out at watchingcomics.com. Hit that subscribe, rate, and review button. As Jake likes to say, it's the nice thing to do, and it'll help other people listen to our awesomeness. Right, Jake?
That's exactly it. You took the words right out of my mouth.
Boom. That's how we do it. So, thanks for listening. We will come back at you next week with the end of Luke Cage Season 2.
We'll see you then.